This video covers the question crafting assignment. What you see here on the screen is just what you'll find in the syllabus, so not too much detail here, but I figured it would be a good place to start. The whole idea of the question crafting assignment is to sort of give you the opportunity to articulate a sophisticated question based on an interpretation from the reading. We'll talk a little bit more about what I'm looking for here in the next couple slides, but generally the question crafting assignment is roughly 200 to 250 words, and it's split into two different paragraphs, one being a preface paragraph and the other paragraph being a more critical question paragraph based on the preface paragraph. Now I want to look at the actual rubric for this assignment. Just a little bit more background about where this assignment's coming from. As a professional philosopher, I have to attend conferences from time to time, and you've probably attended conferences too, in which you watch a presentation and then you're given the opportunity to engage with the author or the presenter in a Q&A session. And if you've ever been at a conference and you've attended one of these sessions, and you've probably experienced somebody who either rambles on for 10-15 minutes and never really asks a pointed question, or they ask a very simple question and the speaker doesn't really know how to engage. And so this assignment is more about sort of teaching you that skill about how to articulate a meaningful question to respond to another author's or another presenter's ideas. So the question crafting assignment is modeled after that type of engaged conversation that you might have in a conference setting. Also, before we dig into the different components of the rubric here, I just want to stress that, again, don't rely too heavily on AI software to produce one of these question crafting assignments, because it's not going to do a very good job. Because what I'm evaluating you on is your ability to articulate a response to a reading within the class. And if you just ask ChatGPT to write you, hey, or say, ChatGPT, write me a meaningful question in response to this article, it's probably not going to have all these different components here. I'm not here to evaluate if I like your idea or I don't like your idea. I don't mean that in a mean or negative way. I care about your ideas. But what I'm grading you on is whether or not you have a certain type of philosophical structure, type of rigor that we expect from a question, especially in a conference setting. And so there's a specific structure to these things, and that's what I'm trying to get you to, not necessarily say that your ideas are good or bad or anything like that. I'm more so grading on the structure. Hopefully I've hammered that point home enough. So if you're looking at the rubric here, you'll see that there's a division into four. The last one is just about structure and format. That's just points that I'm hoping to give you. So as long as you hit the 200 to 250 words, you have the two different paragraphs, you get that 20 points. So this 20%, or that's 20 points I'm trying to give you. The other three are where I'm really doing my critical evaluation of your ability to articulate a point. So the first one being the preface paragraph. So you'll have a preface paragraph, and in that I'm looking for you to sort of focus on a small section of the reading and explain what's going on there. Highlight the different premises, what's the conclusion, what's the thread of reasoning that's going on there, and making sure that you present this in a very digestible way in a very brief amount. So if you were trying to summarize the whole article in this first paragraph, you would just have everybody lost. One of my tips for this assignment is to focus on a single paragraph within the article and just explain what's going on in that paragraph. You might have to go into another paragraph, say, well, this idea about active and passive euthanasia is based on this assumption, and then say, but here's specifically what the author is saying in this part, and unpack that for your audience. That's what I'm looking for in this first section of the rubric. The second section is looking at the question paragraph. And here it's about connecting up to what we're trying to focus on in the preface paragraph, trying to pose a critical question that's more than just like, well, what does this mean? Or am I right to think this? Or is this a good argument? Like, avoid those very basic questions. I'm looking for you to really engage with the reading and try to elaborate on the ideas and the reasoning that's going into this sort of question crafting assignment here. So Max points, the question concentrates on a single premise and the train of thought leading to it. So why is the authors like highlighting this? Why are they giving this argument for it? And why do you want to press them on that? The question indicates the possible implications from responding to the question in a particular way. We'll look at this in the next slide, but the whole idea here is, imagine if you're in a conference setting, you watch somebody give a presentation and you say, oh, you were saying this during your presentation, on one of your slides you had this, blah, blah, blah. That's like your preface paragraph. Your question paragraph is like, oh, based on what you have there, you might get the question of blah, 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 right? And so what you want to try to do is like ask more of the article for your question paragraph. Like, what do you think that might be missing there? What type of implications you might say, well, if we take this advice, then we might run into this, and then how do we handle that problem if that's what's going on? That's the type of sort of reasoning that I want to see play out. The third section here of the rubric is just trying to find a connection between that preface paragraph and that question paragraph. So you don't want to just say, let me summarize all of this, and then let me ask you a question that's completely unrelated to everything that I just set the question up with, right? So a good practice here is presenting some information in the preface paragraph saying, well, so-and-so says this. Sometimes using a short quote, don't use a very long block quote because you don't have too many words to operate with. That again is by design, because if you're in a conference setting, you don't want to be able to say 500 words because it's going to take like 10 minutes, and usually Q&A, it's got to be short, pithy, to the point. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, based on this information in the preface paragraph, I want to ask you this critical question. And a good tactic is to just connect things in the question paragraph to things that you said in the preface paragraph. If you do that, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Finally, let's look at the how-to for the question crafting assignment. This is also available on the web page, so be sure to check it out. Just basic stuff about the assignment. I'm looking for you to submit this as either a Word doc or a PDF. That's just easier for me to access when I'm doing the grading. Also, for this handout, I've done a lot of highlighting. You do not have to highlight your submission whatsoever. The highlighting is just there to hopefully help you see the different elements and how they operate within the assignment. So looking at the preface paragraph, there are two different elements that I'm really looking for as I'm combing through them. The first one is that you're picking up on a specific idea, concept, thread of thinking. So I highlighted that in green here. So different examples you'll see on the screen. A different concept would be like autonomy or teleology or the principle of equality. You'll see a number of them as we go through the readings. And another good tactic here, if you really want to sort of utilize all the resources I provided with you, I have the handout with all the different concepts and ideas in all the different readings. You can pull the different concept that you want to focus on from that if you want, or you can pick something else entirely from the reading. That's totally up to you. But if you're really struggling, it might be good to consult that sort of list of different concepts within the different readings to get an idea. So once you pick a concept, that's what you're going to ultimately explain in this preface paragraph. You'll say, well, in Rachel's paper, the topic of active euthanasia is brought up, and then go into the very specific thing from that article. Don't try to summarize the article again. Think about picking a single paragraph within the article and just really focusing in on that. Trust me, you'll get to the 150 words or so pretty quickly, so don't feel like you're just filling up space. Just be very deliberate with the sentences. Make sure that you're trying to build sort of an account of what was said in the article. Again, if you're thinking about like a real life example, think about a conference, and if you're going to engage somebody, you say, hey, at the 30-minute mark, you presented this slide and you said this, this, and this. I'm taking that to mean that you think this, this, and this. So that's the type of sort of approach that I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to say, this is what they're talking about. This is how we understand that idea, that concept, blah, blah, blah. At the end of this preface paragraph, I'm sort of looking for a critical sentence that sort of explicitly identifies how you're going to engage this concept. The more specific, the better. So you might say that so-and-so uses this concept for this very specific purpose, but we might have some concern when we look a little bit deeper into blah, blah, blah. Right. So sort of a critical turn here in this preface paragraph about like why you find this concept interesting and what specifically the author is trying to do with that concept that you're going to engage with. So that's the preface paragraph. Then once you get to the question paragraph, I'm looking for a critical question that's really developed in response to this critical reflection in the preface paragraph. And so the idea is that they depend on one another. You present something in the preface paragraph that is within the article, you explain it for your audience, and then you say, well, based on this understanding, we might have this question. And so here in the last part of the handout, you'll see an actual example. It's one from an ancient Greek example with Aristotle. So Aristotle had this concept of actuality and potentiality. And you'll see in this preface paragraph, the idea is you introduce the concept very early on. First sentence should always introduce the concept. So-and-so relies heavily on X concept. And then you might give the motivation for why that concept is there, but then you must say, however, so-and-so uses this in a specific way to get a specific point in their argument across. And then you want to explain what that means and so on and so forth. And in this preface paragraph, you might use an example. I use an example in this one about the oak tree and the acorn. Just make sure that if you introduce an example, if you use a quote, make sure that they're short. Don't waste all of your words in this preface paragraph just giving a block quote or introducing an example. You really want to just get in and out as quickly as you can. Give the detail that's relevant. Don't have to focus on everything. You have a very specific purpose that you are introducing this information, and that's because you want to ask a very detailed question in the second paragraph. That's what you should be thinking about. Then, once you get to the second paragraph here, you see that I start with the question. The question can come towards the beginning, in the middle, at the end. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. And so the idea is just to say, here's my question, and make sure that the concept appears in your question, because you want to say, my question is based on everything that I was just talking about. And if we take all those details, then we might be pushed in this direction, and we might want to answer to this question. You don't have to answer the question that you are posing. This is more about like seeing if you can follow the logic and critically analyze an article, or at least a point within the article, in a meaningful way. And so that's sort of the basics here. Again, if you are concerned about this assignment, please feel free to reach out. I always am happy to look at an assignment early. If you can get it to me like roughly 4 days before the assignment due date, that's great. I will give you expansive feedback. I'll tell you exactly where I think you could improve it. So that's sort of the question crafting assignment in a nutshell.